I implored my former partner to reconsider our relationship. I attempted to persuade my former spouse to resume our relationship, but he declined, citing my role in damaging his emotional well-being. I am uncertain if this is the appropriate forum for such a disclosure, but the title of the group aligns with the circumstances I am navigating. I am sharing this personal account at the recommendation of my therapist, who encouraged me to express my feelings. Reddit seemed an ideal platform for this purpose, and so I am doing so. I am a 42-year-old female, 42-year-old male. 4 years ago, I engaged in an extramarital affair that caused significant distress to my family. I experience regret for this action on a daily basis. My husband and I began our relationship at the age of 19. At that time, we were not yet mature enough to handle the responsibilities and complexities of a long-term partnership. I was initially optimistic that my marriage would last. For 22 years, I believed that we were happy. My husband has occasional outbursts of anger, but he is an emotionally expressive person who tends to wear his heart on his sleeve. When he becomes upset, he tends to dwell on the issues that have been bothering him. I empathize with this behavior, as I have a similar tendency to say hurtful things when I am angry. Despite these occasional disagreements, our sex life was fulfilling. He expressed a desire for more intimacy, and he made efforts to improve our relationship. However, as a stay-at-home at this juncture, it is necessary to pause and reflect. As the primary caregiver for a family of 5, 3 girls and 2 boys, I experienced fatigue. My husband expressed opinions when we were not engaged in sex activities, which I found to be bothersome. In retrospect, we could have engaged in sex more frequently. However, he did contribute to domestic tasks. He worked 60 hours per week and ensured that I slept in on weekends. I awoke to a clean house and breakfast. As the 3 eldest children began attending college, I experienced a sense of emptiness. I felt bored and somewhat stir-crazy. I still had my 2 younger boys, but they were in junior high school. I was no longer a necessity in my own life. My husband observed this and encouraged me to pursue employment. In retrospect, I should have declined, pursued a personal interest, or made different choices. My husband is of average build, with slight overweight, but is considered attractive. My weight fluctuated between 150 and 210 pounds over the years. When I resumed work as a customer service representative, I weighed 160 pounds and felt healthy. It had been 21 years since I had been in the workforce, and it felt good to be back. Over time, I began spending time with individuals in their early 20s. I was encouraged by my husband to interact with younger female colleagues at work, as I lacked female companionship. I initially resisted, but eventually began socializing with them. These interactions led me to believe that I could find a better partner, that my husband was not attractive enough, and that I was held back from success. Even one of my male colleagues asserted that my husband is a beta pretending to be an alpha, and I was receptive to this characterization at the time. I perceived my husband as being outwardly aggressive but lacking the ability to back up his words with action. I observed him engaging in verbal confrontations with individuals who were verbally abusive, but I never witnessed him resorting to physical altercations. I am uncertain as to the origin of this sentiment. I held him in high regard and reciprocated his respect. He held me in high regard as well, and I considered myself fortunate to be his partner. However, I allowed the opinions of our friends to influence my perception of our relationship. I began to believe that I loved him more than he loved me. This subtle suggestion continued to influence my thoughts and actions, particularly when I interacted with my colleague. Corkers and I conversed, and eventually I initiated flirtatious interactions with the same male colleague who had previously referred to my husband as a beta. He was of a similar age, possessed a handsome appearance, and demonstrated physical fitness. As time progressed, a series of events unfolded. He initiated contact, and I reciprocated. We frequently engaged in sexual intercourse, and I experienced a sense of invigoration and desire. I treated my husband in a manner that was dismissive and disrespectful, denying him sexual intimacy and even ridiculing his weight. I even attempted to convince him of his irrationality when he questioned our relationship. I was previously unaware of the origin of my actions. Upon reflection, I am uncertain as to the motivation behind my behavior. I am similarly unsure of the identity of the individual I was emulating. It was only when my husband angrily shattered a glass cup in my presence, glaring at me with hatred, that I became aware of the gravity of my actions. He accused me of infidelity, revealing a hickey on my neck. My sons, witnessing this, expressed shock. The eldest boy's eyes became red with anger before he rushed away. I immediately contacted my lover, expressing my anger and frustration. He informed me that he wished to establish his dominance, and I experienced a profound sense of revulsion. It was the first occasion on which I experienced remorse for my actions. He returned home at approximately midnight and gazed at me intently, inquiring as to whether I wished to deny the truth. I was compelled to respond in the negative, yet I could discern the truth on his face. Consequently, I informed him that the incident had occurred 4 months prior. He then demanded to know whether I had engaged in sexual intercourse. I remained silent. He proceeded to walk around me, only to halt abruptly by my ear and declare, in a low voice, that he wished to divorce me. I was overcome with rage. He informed me that he had never previously engaged in such a manner with me, and I was overcome with emotion, particularly when I observed our son gazing at me from the foot of the stairs. They appeared to be filled with such intense anger, and I was enraged at him for displaying such behavior in such an overt manner. I should have been angry with him and disgusted with myself, but I was unable to fully process the situation. My husband's sudden change in behavior made it seem as if a light switch had been flipped, and his love for me was instantly gone. The workers rallied behind me, convincing me that I was making the right choice and that I could spend more time with my lover. I was persuaded to believe this, despite my initial reluctance. I was not keen on the idea of a separation period. My husband moved out of the house and into an apartment a half-mile away. My sons were hostile towards me, and my daughters refused to speak to me. My lover began coming over to the house despite my protests, but he simply came. My children were enraged by this, and they refused to leave the first time my lover came to pick up the boys. My lover was more physically fit than my children's father, but he simply smiled at him. He told him, "Not yet," with a smile. However, when they left, I was extremely angry at my lover. I informed him that his actions were inappropriate, but he ignored me. He only yelled at me when he had enough. My lover began to exert control over my life, dictating what I ate and what I wore. He made disparaging remarks in front of others, and I allowed it to continue. After the divorce was finalized, we negotiated a 50-50th split with a payment plan to purchase his half of the house we had shared. However, the boys wanted to live with him. I have not seen my eldest daughter in a long time. She does not return my phone calls. I was only made aware that he was in a committed relationship when he himself disclosed this information. It was an extraordinary experience to observe him affix his signature to the relevant documentation. I experienced a profound sense of distress when he removed his wedding ring and placed it on the document. I felt a sensation akin to that experienced when a ball is trapped in one's throat. Upon his departure, I came to realize that I had not offered him an apology. I picked up the pen and continued to gaze at the ring. At that moment, I became acutely aware of the depth of my feelings of regret. My actions resulted in the destruction of my marriage, my relationship with my children, and I believe I was in an abusive relationship. I was overwhelmed with emotion and unable to breathe. I eventually signed the document, a week after my divorce. This was also when my partner struck me for the first time. I was discussing my day with him when I accidentally knocked over his phone. He responded with a look of disdain, called me clumsy, and slapped me. I contacted the authorities. My former partner was the first to inquire whether he had touched my children. I informed him that he had not, and he abruptly terminated the call. That night, I experienced a profound emotional distress. In due course, my current partner began to use his hands inappropriately. This pattern persisted for 2 months. At the time, I believed that I had brought it upon myself. My former partner had never laid a hand on me. My current partner did, and I perceived this as retribution. It ceased only when he assaulted one of my daughters, who was home from college due to illness. She was the only one. The individual who wished to remain in the residence was the 2 eldest children, who confronted their father. One telephone call from her and my ex-partner entered the house, offered my lover a free hit, and then proceeded to beat him into a bloody pulp. My ex-partner displayed no emotion throughout the entire incident. I was forced to plead with him to stop. He then proceeded to examine the injuries sustained by our daughters and inquire as to which hand had been used to inflict the damage. He subsequently broke his right hand by stomping on it. The altercation was concluded when my ex-partner took my lover outside and physically restrained him. Throughout the incident, my ex did not acknowledge me. He then transported my lover to the hospital, informing the emergency room staff that my lover had fallen down a flight of stairs. My husband remained by my lover's side throughout this ordeal. The following day, my lover resigned from his position and terminated our relationship. I, on the other hand, continued working, and my ex-partner began engaging in sexual relationships with some of my single acquaintances, including a couple of my co-workers. One of the workers was the individual who had encouraged me to engage in infidelity. I only became aware of this after my colleague was experiencing distress due to her partner's repeated boasts about having slept with her and his refusal to respond to her calls. It was distressing to learn that he was engaging in such behavior. I believe that he was doing so deliberately. I had relationships with several other men, but they did not last. I am a single mother of 5 children, and it appeared that my relationships with men were unsuccessful. Then there was the experience with SX. Even with my lover, I found myself dissatisfied with the level of satisfaction I was able to achieve, and I began to question why I had allowed this to occur. I was previously content and happy, and I was perplexed as to how I had allowed myself to be manipulated. During this period, I noticed a distinct lack of noise in my house, with my sons either confined to their rooms or in the care of their father. My daughters, with the exception of my third-born, were reluctant to communicate with me, and this was a source of distress. My ex-partner observed these developments and initiated a family meeting, during which he gathered all the children together. Despite my desire to have all of our children under the same roof, the majority of them did not want to be there. My youngest son was told to speak with me, and he responded by calling me a whore. This shocked me, as it was a highly offensive and hurtful thing to say. My ex then slapped him right in front of me. He then asked, "Have I ever called your mother that?" My son shook his head, and my ex responded, "Your mother takes care of you. She loves you, and you will respect her. Start respecting your mother." He then proceeded to look at all of our children, which conveyed a clear message. My relationship with my children began to improve during the 2nd-year anniversary of our divorce. We were civil with one another and even engaged in light-hearted conversation. He frequently visited our home to address various matters related to the children. For a brief period, I felt that I had my husband back. However, he suddenly shoved me and stated, "No," before abruptly departing a month later. Subsequently, he commenced a romantic relationship with our youngest teacher, who is 10 years his junior. They share numerous mutual interests. She is notably attractive, and I attempted to maintain civility while they were dating. However, it was distressing to witness him regarding her with the same level of attention he had previously directed towards me. His actions towards her, including his physical contact, elicited laughter from her. She became the focal point of his attention, and I came to understand why people envied us and frequently commented on our apparent fortune and devotion. I had not previously recognized the extent of my own naivety. Following the announcement of their pregnancy and impending nuptials, I experienced a nervous breakdown. I awoke to find him by my side, gently removing the stray strands of hair from my face. I began to sob, imploring him for forgiveness for the damage I had caused to our family. He remained silent, merely allowing me to express my anguish while holding me. He visited me daily, only departing to speak with his fiancée. She even came to check on me. I do not deserve their sympathy. Her benevolence extended to locating a therapist, for which she secured financial compensation. The therapist's demeanor was, at best, forthright. She posited that I was experiencing a midlife crisis and, rather than engaging in discourse with my husband, I permitted these young women to exert undue influence. She elucidated that they sought to destabilize my marriage, as they were single, unlikely to wed, and perceived me as an accessible target. Additionally, she noted my proclivity for solitude, the fact that the primary instigator had a prior relationship with my ex-husband, and the potential for emotional contagion. After several months of sessions, the therapist observed that I was still grappling with the issue. She recommended that I post on Reddit, create a disposable account, and allow myself to express my emotions freely. This approach is therapeutic and offers a distinctive alternative to group therapy. My new wife is a kind and considerate individual. She frequently visits to inquire about my well-being and ensures I am doing okay. Despite my initial reluctance, I find myself unable to harbor any negative sentiments towards her. She is genuinely benevolent, and their twin boys are a source of great beauty in our lives. My former spouse also makes an effort to check in on me, ensuring I am nourishing myself and reminding me that, despite the circumstances, I will always be the mother of his children and he will always be there for me. A friend of my ex-husband's even came over last Saturday and let me sleep while he cleaned up the house and had breakfast waiting for me. This gesture made me emotionally overwhelmed and prompted me to shed tears. I miss my ex-husband and my former best friend. To this day, I am perplexed by how I was so easily influenced. I feel isolated and alone. My children are present in my life, but our relationship is not as close as it once was. They are here, yet the one person I desire the most is not. The individual I am most interested in pursuing is not the one who has moved on, and attributes my role in this to the fact that I will eventually move on with my life. However, at this present moment in time, I believe that I deserve this. I deserve to have this opportunity. Edit, I have spoken to someone in the messages and I wanted to set the matter straight. I wanted to talk about what my ex went through, but I felt like it wasn't my place to talk about his pain. I have tried to make amends countless times. Despite numerous attempts at communication, my former partner was unresponsive. My ongoing relationship with another individual also presented a challenge, as this person was unwilling to allow me space and privacy. I felt a sense of entrapment during the affair, experiencing a peculiar state of mind that I can only describe as an out-of-body experience. That day was supposed to be the last, but my former partner chose to leave a lasting impact on me. I recall pleading with my former partner to reconsider, hoping for another chance. He granted me another chance. It was days after he discovered my infidelity. He simply looked at me and walked away. He spoke to me on only 3 occasions. The first was when he attempted to be civil during the signing of the divorce papers. The second was when I called him. The third was when my partner assaulted me. The day after he nearly killed my AP, he unloaded his pent-up frustrations on me. As previously mentioned, he has a tendency to let things fester before he became enraged, verbally abusing me for my perceived foolish decisions that had led to the breakdown of our marriage. He stated that he was unable to grieve for our relationship because he felt it was his responsibility to be strong for the children. I was overwhelmed with emotion and simply cried. I was devastated by the realization that I had broken this man, who had previously been so strong. I attempted to apologize, but he was not receptive. He asserted that my AP would never contact me again. I attempted to communicate with him again, but he ignored me. It took approximately 1 year before we were able to engage in a conversation. Initially, he was uninterested in communicating with me when he began engaging in sexual relationships with some of the women I knew. I allowed him to pursue these relationships without interference. I understood the reasons behind his actions and felt that they were justified. This shift in behavior coincided with a family meeting, during which he began acting civil for the sake of the children. During this period, I came to recognize the extent of my own actions and their impact on my children. Following the family meeting, my children began to interact with me once more. My youngest child was the last to do so, but I persisted in my efforts to reconcile with them. I was determined to repair the damage I had caused and to regain their trust. As they observed my efforts, they gradually began to open up, although not as much during the 2nd year. I was pleased to see my children laughing in the house while my former husband made an effort to interact with me in a jovial manner, assisting with household tasks, preparing food on the grill, and dancing with our daughters. I believed that if I demonstrated sufficient contrition, I could rekindle our relationship. I engaged in couple counseling, made an effort to dress in a manner that he found appealing, and wore the attire he had purchased for me. The perfume I had applied to my hair was in accordance with his preferences, yet he chose to ignore me. This prompted me to attempt to initiate a kiss on that particular day. I perceived a fleeting opportunity, but he swiftly intervened. I became emotional and attempted to persuade him, but he simply regarded me with indifference. He informed me that our relationship was untenable due to my actions, which had caused him irreparable harm. He asserted that he would never again engage in physical intimacy with me, citing my infidelity as the reason. He will never hold me because I allowed another man to touch me. He will never sleep with me because I permitted another man to sleep beside me. I identified the women he had been with after our divorce, and he made it clear that these encounters occurred after our divorce. My actions, however, occurred during our marriage. During that period, a person's body and heart are considered to belong to their spouse. I am attempting to maintain a platonic relationship with him, but it is challenging. I have been married to this man for over 2 decades, and I effectively destroyed our marriage in 6 months due to a midlife crisis, my desperate need for female companionship, and my urge to fit in. When I reflect on the past, I am uncertain about my actions. The identity of the perpetrator was unknown. My third child was aware of the situation and, had she not been present, I would have considered suicide. She provided emotional support and protection. I was unaware that she was home that day. Typically, the abuse occurred when the children were absent or while driving to and from work. I have always dreaded the moment when my children leave the house. I allowed my ex-husband to mistreat me because I felt that I deserved it. On that particular night, I stood up for myself and told him to leave. He was not pleased at all when I did so. When he hit me and pinned me against the wall, my daughter appeared out of nowhere and jumped on his back. When he hit me again, he then flipped her over and slapped her on the back. I struck him and proceeded to enter the garage with my daughter. He continued to bang on the door, and she contacted her father. When my former spouse arrived, he forced his way through the garage door, and I was forced to intervene to prevent him from harming him. His new wife is a positive influence on him. She permitted my ex-husband was permitted to love again and to be himself again. I was not inclined to become part of his new life, but she was adamant that she had also been in an abusive relationship prior to meeting my husband. She was keen to avoid any animosity and to establish trust. She made it clear that she has claws and is not afraid to use them if I overstep. My children adore her. She was the English teacher to the majority of them. I experience moments of overwhelming guilt that are crippling. I still work for that company and eventually became a manager, firing those women. I was aware of their illicit activities, so removing them from the situation was not an issue. I simply miss what I have reached the end of my narrative. I have now begun a new account, which I will refer to as Story 2. After my sister's actions, I require counsel regarding the appropriate course of action. I am currently unsure of the best way to proceed. I was 21 years of age when my fiancé proposed marriage. He was the epitome of joy in my life. We had been acquainted since our time together in preschool. Our families were also closely connected. He was very close with my family. He would come and have dinner with us on a daily basis, and vice versa. He has no siblings, but I have 2 older sisters, which is very important to him. We grew up together when we started dating. I don't think our parents stopped celebrating for weeks. He helped me. My fiancé helped me to cope with a lot of my anxiety. Even when I gained a little weight and my mother berated me, saying that he was going to leave me, he told her off and said that he loved me for who I was, not for what I looked like. Despite claiming that I was the most beautiful girl in the world to him, we were only engaged for 6 months before the incident involved my middle oldest sister, whom I will refer to as Nikki. She was a very cold person who never showed any affection. She only ever opened up to my fiancé because she saw him as a brother. He also helped her through many of her dark times, including battling drug addictions and breaking the law. My sister and I never saw eye to eye. Despite my affection for her as my sister, I had reservations about her as an individual. She suddenly proposed a night out at the club, as we had never socialized together previously. She expressed remorse for her aloofness towards me. I consented, and that evening, we proceeded to the club. Clubbing was not my usual preference, but once I had consumed a few drinks, I began to relax. After consuming a few alcoholic beverages, I became more relaxed and began to enjoy myself. The evening proceeded without incident until Nikki observed a man across the room whom she indicated she wished to pursue romantically. She proceeded to approach the man and, after a brief interval, returned with a displeased expression. I inquired about the situation, but I did not inquire further, as I was reluctant to jeopardize the evening's enjoyment. However, she eventually revealed that the gentleman in question had declined to provide his contact information, but was keen on obtaining mine instead. I expressed my opinion that he was a poor choice, and suggested that there were numerous other individuals present who would be delighted to have a relationship with a woman of her caliber. Nevertheless, she remained unmoved, stating that she informed me that she needed to use the restroom and that we would subsequently depart. I waited for approximately an hour, during which time I consumed a variety of cocktails. I then began experiencing symptoms of dizziness and lightheadedness. I decided to take a taxi home, as I was confident that Nikki had already left. However, I encountered a friend of Nikki's, who she had briefly dated. He inquired as to whether I required assistance with my vehicle, and I informed him that I was planning to hail a taxi. He stated that he was preparing to depart and suggested that we could share one. I agreed, and we proceeded to exit the club together and into the first taxi we encountered. I attempted to locate my mobile phone in my handbag, but I felt myself becoming increasingly lightheaded. I am unsure of the events that transpired subsequently, as I lost consciousness and was unable to recall anything that occurred until the following morning. Upon regaining consciousness, I found myself seated on a hard sofa, experiencing a severe headache. I then realized that I was in the residence of Nikki's friend. My phone was positioned on a glass table in front of me, but it appeared to be flat. When he became aware of my awakening, he offered me some tablets. He provided me with water and explained that I had lost consciousness in the taxi. He stated that he did not recall my parents' address, so he simply transported me back to his residence and placed me on the sofa. I informed him that I needed to return home, as my fiancée would be concerned. He arranged for a taxi, and I departed when I arrived at my parents' house. My parents are my father and mother. Nikki, my fiancé, and his parents were all standing in the living room. I initially believed they were concerned about my well-being. However, as soon as I opened my mouth, my fiancé demanded to know how I could have done such a thing to him. I attempted to clarify that my phone had run out of battery, but he then began shouting about how I could have possibly cheated on him. I was perplexed by his reaction, as I had no idea why he would. He believed that I was attempting to clarify the events of the evening, but I was repeatedly interrupted. Nikki then interjected, stating that I was a liar and that I was capable of being so heartless towards a man who had been supportive of me. She then accused me of flirting with various men throughout the night. She observed me depart with her friend. I informed her of the events that had transpired, and she presented me with photographic evidence captured on her mobile device. As we were leaving, his hand was placed on my back, seemingly encouraging me to proceed outside. The photographic evidence appeared incriminating, and I was so intoxicated that I was unaware his hand was on my back. My fiancé was enraged and repeatedly voiced his displeasure. Furthermore, both his mother and mine were in a state of distress. I then requested that Nikki contact her friend to ascertain whether the allegations were true. However, when she did so, he provided a conflicting account of events. He stated that I had implored him to take me back to his residence. Upon doing so, we engaged in sexual intercourse on multiple occasions. I became enraged and began to weep and shout. At this point, I was aware that Nikki had orchestrated this entire sequence of events with the intention of portraying me in a negative light. I implored my fiancé to accept my account, but he merely shook his head and departed when the other individuals had vacated the premises. My mother then struck me across the face and instructed me to leave. I subsequently sought refuge at the residence of a friend, where I remained for several nights. During those nights, I contacted my fiancé repeatedly, imploring him to accept my account of events and disbelieve the alternative narrative. However, he did not respond to my calls or messages. My mother sent me a text message, stating that she was removing me from the family residence and expressing disbelief at my actions. She also used a number of other disparaging terms. I am unable to reiterate the details here. She did not allow me the opportunity to retrieve my belongings, instead discarding them. As a result, I found myself without a residence. My family members did not offer me shelter, as they had chosen to support my fiancé and mother. In less than 2 days, I was rendered homeless and single. My entire world had been upended by Nikki's actions. Despite my best efforts to regain my fiancé's and my family's trust, I was unable to achieve this goal. During the Christmas season, I attempted to reconcile with my mother, sleeping on various couches in her house in the process. Upon arriving at my parents' residence, I knocked on the door, but there was no response. My friend responded, then called to inform me that my family was in another state celebrating Christmas and had posted pictures online. Everyone was present, including my sister's parents, grandparents, and even my fiancé and his family. Upon seeing the photos, I was overcome with emotion, as they all appeared to be enjoying themselves. They appeared to be experiencing a profound sense of joy, which prompted me to weep for an extended period. Ultimately, I opted to sever all communication with them. I even returned my engagement ring. My friend was acquainted with an individual who was seeking assistance with his lodging. This person had arrangements above his place of employment, which allowed me to secure affordable housing and work at the same location. I was motivated to embark on a new phase of my life, as I was distressed by the lack of support from my family. I was able to relocate promptly and was initially successful in managing my finances. However, the apartment was small, and I had to work over 10 hours per day, which significantly impacted my savings. I subsequently moved out of the apartment. I was subsequently able to rent a more desirable condominium, but I continue to work at the restaurant as assistant manager. It has been approximately 2 years since I left and have not communicated with any of my family. I am unaware of their circumstances until I received a visit from my former fiancé. All these feelings came rushing back, and I was overcome with the urge to embrace him. However, I was reminded of the pain I had endured and attempted to shut the door on him. He prevented me from doing so and requested that I allow him to explain. He informed me that Nikki had married and had confessed that she had lied about the situation. He explained that my family had been trying to contact me and wanted to meet with me. I informed him that I needed time to consider whether I wanted to have them in my life. He then departed. Since that time, I have been in a state of emotional distress, unsure of how to proceed. I am unable to forgive Nikki for her actions, which I consider to be irreparable. While I recognize that my other family and fiancé were not aware of her deceit, I also feel that they withdrew their support prematurely, without allowing me the opportunity to clarify my perspective. I am uncertain whether I should extend forgiveness. I would be grateful for any advice you could provide. Thank you for taking the time to read this update. I am overwhelmed by the support, advice, and kind messages I have received. I would like to thank each of you personally, but I have not yet had the opportunity to do so. I would like to thank each and every one of you for your messages of support and advice. I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of responses, and I am truly grateful for your kind words. I must admit that I was initially taken aback by the sheer volume of messages and the level of love and support they conveyed. I would like to apologize for the delay in posting an update. I was in a state of shock and unsure of how to cope with the situation. I contacted my former romantic partner once more, uncertain of my next steps. It eventually became apparent that he had provided my contact information to my parents, as they sent messages requesting a meeting. I did not respond, intending to arrange a Zoom meeting instead. However, this was unnecessary, as they also arrived at my residence. My father was the one who came to the door and saw me. I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I vomited, which he then proceeded to clean up. We sat down, and I began to weep uncontrollably. My feelings were all jumbled together, and my father had worn the same cologne for a long time, so when I smelled it, it triggered a flood of memories. He attempted to embrace me, but I pushed him away. I pushed him away and inquired as to his purpose in being there. He proceeded to explain that he and my mother are undergoing a divorce. He stated that he implored my mother to contact me immediately upon my departure, but she declined, asserting that I was behaving like a child. She further asserted that if I wished to leave them after committing such an egregious act, I could do so on my own terms. From that point onward, I inquired of him how long it took for them to become aware of my absence. He replied that they returned home after New Year's Eve and were intending to invite me for a discussion. At that time, they contacted my friend, who informed them that I had departed and was unknown to her. I then asked him why he had not contacted me. He listened to my account of the events and inquired as to why I was dismissed with such ease. He began to weep, stating that he never intended for things to escalate to such a degree and expressing his desire to undo what he had done. I informed him that when Nikki was discovered to be using drugs and her status was revealed to the school, she was not immediately expelled. Instead, we embarked on a vacation, during which my mother hoped that her daughter would be able to focus on other activities. During this period, my mother's daughter became dependent on alcohol. On numerous occasions, my mother's family members defended her actions. My father stated that he was unaware that my mother would remove me from the family home. He believed that I would only be away for a few days, but then they decided at the last minute to spend Christmas away from home. During the Christmas holiday, my mother allegedly promised my father that I would be permitted to return home after they had departed. I informed him that she had discarded all of my belongings, but he asserted that they remained intact and accused her of deceit. I inquired about the fate of Nikki and was told that she was no longer in his life and that he wished to have no further contact with her. However, my mother has been imploring him to pardon Nikki, citing her poor health. They had already lost one daughter, and she feared losing another. He severed communication with my mother and Nikki and has been pressuring my ex to locate me. My ex acquiesced, and when my father informed him that he had blocked my mother and Nikki and revealed my whereabouts, I informed him that he would not be permitted to make any further contact with me unless I gave him explicit permission to do so. He inquired as to what would happen next, and I replied that I was unsure. I then proceeded to provide a detailed account of the emotional distress I had experienced as a result of his actions, including the pain of witnessing the happiness of others without my presence and the difficulty of adjusting to this new reality. By the conclusion of the conversation, I was emotionally exhausted, yet I was gratified to have articulated my feelings. It was as though a considerable burden had been lifted from my shoulders. My father then suggested that he was aware of several locations in the vicinity and would assist me in securing a more suitable apartment. He also indicated that he would help me obtain a more lucrative position. I informed him that I would not be leaving my current position, as my superior had been extremely supportive, and I was motivated to demonstrate my gratitude. I stated that I did not seek his assistance, but I did express a desire to reconcile, provided that the process aligns with my personal expectations and is conducted over an extended period. To trust him again, and I may never be able to trust him again. He said he would do anything to make up for what he did. I asked him why Nikki did this and if she had said anything about it. She said she thought my ex deserved better than me and that she wanted to see him happy because he was making too many sacrifices in the relationship. She loved him like a brother and wanted to break the engagement off. That night, she asked her friend to come and escort me out of the club so she could take photos and take me home so her plan could work. She said, no sexual activity occurred. I retired for the night on the sofa, and that was the extent of our interaction. Throughout the night, he engaged in video gaming, and I awoke to find him still at it. My father had planned to retrieve my belongings from my mother's residence and bring them to me, but I informed him I no longer desired those items. I then inquired about Nikki's husband, and he stated that my mother had kept the entire situation under wraps. However, he had obtained her contact information and recorded it for me after my father departed. I ultimately decided to contact Nikki's husband, and I was overcome with anxiety the entire time. I was disconcerted to hear her voice in the background. When he answered, I divulged the entirety of the situation, which I subsequently regretted. I should have introduced the topic gradually, as he seemed confused. I provided a detailed account of her substance abuse issues. I anticipated a hostile response, including insults and defenses of Nikki. Instead, he expressed disbelief and revealed that he had suspected her involvement. He also mentioned ongoing issues between her and his sister. I advised him to cease disseminating false information about his sister and to take responsibility for the rift between them. His sister did not attend their wedding. I informed him that I was sorry but that he should reconcile with his sister because Nikki was the source of the problem, not her. We conversed further and then he terminated the call. I am uncertain what he will do with that information. I hope he will sever ties with her and leave. I have decided to reconcile with my father because he seemed to be a kind individual. Even he has lost his sister because of Nikki, so I have decided to reconcile with my father. My mother has always been the dominant figure in our family, and her actions throughout our marriage have been questionable. My father's decision to divorce her and cut off communication with Nikki demonstrates his commitment to making amends. I do not believe I will ever reconcile with my mother. I am disinclined to reconcile with my mother, who also considers Nikki to be a victim in this situation. At this juncture, I am uninterested in her excuses. Should she reach out and we engage in dialogue, I will provide an update on my ex in this forum. I have not had the opportunity to meet with him and discuss the matter. My father suggested he accompany me, but he informed him that I would be overwhelmed if both were present. Furthermore, observing their separation will facilitate the formulation of well-considered decisions. He also mentioned that my ex was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend, who had fabricated the entire incident. He was initially charged, but the charges were subsequently dropped a few days later. I will provide an update to the post when I have the opportunity to speak with my ex. I extend my gratitude to you all for your patience, compassion, and support.